Welcome back to Study Hall, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling a topic that might seem modern, but has roots stretching back centuries.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating how humans have always been concerned with family planning, even without the technology we have today.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. We're talking about birth control, a topic that's still sometimes taboo even now, but we're going way back to ancient Egypt even.
That's right. Those ancient Egyptians were pretty clever. They figured out a birth control method using acacia honey and lint. Can you believe that?
Acacia honey and that sounds more like a home remedy than birth control.
Well, it actually kind of was. But get this, acacia actually has spermicidal properties. Modern science has actually confirmed this. It's amazing how they figured that out so long ago.
Seriously, that's pretty impressive for a civilization that predates modern medicine by thousands of years. They were really in tune with nature, weren't they?
Definitely. And that connection to nature was key to their medical practices. They observed and experimented, and, well, they came up with some pretty innovative solutions.
So ancient Egypt had their acacia concoction.
Yeah.
What about other ancient civilizations? Were they exploring similar methods?
Oh, yeah, definitely. In ancient Greece and Rome, they used a plant called silphium for both contraception and abortion. It was so popular, it was actually harvested into extinction.
Wow. Talk about a hot commodity. But I guess that makes it hard to study now if it doesn't exist anymore, right?
Exactly. It's a shame because we can only glean so much from ancient texts. We know it was highly sought after, which speaks volumes about how important birth control was, even back then.
It's fascinating to see how these ancient cultures tackled such a universal human concern. So we've got ancient Egyptians with their acacia mix, the Greeks and Romans with their silphium. What other ancient birth control practices were there?
Well, ancient China was pretty innovative, too. They used cottonseed oil. Turns out it does have contraceptive effects, something modern science has confirmed as well.
Really? So like the acacia in Egypt, the cottonseed oil actually work?
Yeah, pretty much. But there's the catch. It also seems to have some potential side effects, which might explain why it's not exactly a go-to method today.
Makes sense. Effectiveness is great, but safety is always a concern. So plant-based solutions were popular across the ancient world. It seems like they were tapping into the power of nature for their family planning needs.
Exactly, and they weren't limited to just plants either. Barrier methods were also in use, believe it or not. Both the Romans and the ancient Chinese used condoms.
Like condoms. Back then, I mean, what were they made of? Certainly not latex.
You got it. They were made from things like animal intestines and linen. Pretty resourceful, huh?
Animal intestines. That's definitely not what comes to mind when I think of condoms. It's amazing, though, that they even had that concept back then.
It is. It shows a basic understanding of, well, how things work. And it also highlights the importance of disease prevention, something that's always been intertwined with birth control.
So we've got plant-based methods and early condoms in play. It seems like ancient civilizations were way ahead of their time in some ways. When do things start to shift toward more modern contraceptive options?
Well, there's a major turning point in the 16th century with an Italian anatomist named Gabriele Falloppio. You might recognize the name. He's the one who discovered and named the fallopian tubes.
Oh, wow. So he was clearly a pioneer in the field of anatomy. I'm guessing he had a hand in the evolution of condoms.
Exactly. During the syphilis epidemic, he designed linen sheaths, basically early condoms, to combat the spread of the disease. It was the first documented scientific description of a condom.
So the focus at that point was more on disease prevention than contraception.
Right, exactly. But Falloppio's work marked a shift. It sparked the recognition that condoms could also be used for birth control. It opened up a whole new avenue for family planning.
So it's like the purpose of condoms evolved alongside our understanding of anatomy and disease.
Exactly. And by the 18th century, condoms made from animal skin were being explicitly marketed for both disease prevention and birth control in England. They even had marketing campaigns back then.
Marketing campaigns for condoms in the 18th century. That seems pretty daring considering the social norms of the time.
Oh, it was. There was definitely pushback. Religious and conservative groups saw condoms as immoral and a challenge to traditional values, and even some doctors questioned their effectiveness.
Sounds familiar, huh? Some things never change. But despite the controversies, it seems like condoms continue to gain traction as a contraceptive method.
They did. But things took a bit of a turn during the Victorian era with its strict moral code. Talking about birth control became taboo. It was a challenging time for those advocating for reproductive rights.
The Victorian era. It's hard to imagine such a fundamental aspect of health being so taboo. How did things progress from there?
It was definitely an uphill battle. But this is where the story of Margaret Sanger comes in. She's a true pivotal figure in the history of birth control.
Sanger. Yes, I've heard her name before. She was a real trailblazer. But remind us, what exactly was her role in all of this?
Well, as a nurse, Sanger witnessed firsthand the suffering caused by lack of access to birth control. She saw how it disproportionately affected poor women, and she dedicated her life to challenging those Victorian norms and fighting for reproductive rights.
So she was at the forefront of this movement, challenging social norms and advocating for women's health. That must have been incredibly difficult in that era.
It was. She faced a lot of opposition. She was even arrested for distributing information about contraception, but she was fearless.
Mm.
She understood that access to birth control was essential for women's empowerment and social equality.
What were some of the specific obstacles she faced? I mean, besides the obvious social stigma.
Well, one major hurdle was the Comstock Act passed in the U.S. in 1873. This law basically criminalized the spread of information about contraception. It made it incredibly difficult to educate people and advocate for change.
Wow, talk about a setback. It's incredible that she persisted despite such restrictive laws.
Sanger was undeterred. She saw a need and was determined to meet it. Her vision extended beyond just promoting existing methods. She believed a more reliable and discreet solution was needed. And that's where the idea of a hormonal contraceptive, what we know as the pill, began to take shape.
Now, that was a game changer. But I imagine the science behind it was pretty complex for the time.
Absolutely. Developing the pill required years of research and involved multiple key figures. Sanger found a scientific partner in Dr. Gregory Pincus, a brilliant, though somewhat controversial biologist known for pushing boundaries.
It sounds like a perfect partnership, a visionary activist and a daring scientist.
Exactly. And with financial backing from Catherine McCormick, a wealthy philanthropist and women's rights advocate, they had the resources to pursue this ambitious goal. Pincus focused his research on progesterone, a hormone crucial in regulating the menstrual cycle. His idea was to synthesize this hormone to effectively suppress ovulation and prevent pregnancy.
That's amazing. Synthesizing hormones back then must have been incredibly challenging.
It was a complex process involving years of trials and testing different compounds. Pincus worked with Dr. John Rock, a gynecologist who had already been experimenting with progesterone for treating menstrual disorders. Together, they meticulously honed the formula and dosage to create a pill that was both effective and safe.
Safe being the key word there, I imagine.
Yeah.
But even with scientific breakthroughs, I can't imagine the path to approval was easy, especially given the social and religious climate at the time.
You're right. The clinical trials, some conducted in the U.S. and others in Puerto Rico, were essential, but also raised ethical concerns.
What were some of those concerns?
Well, the issue of informed consent was paramount, particularly for the women participating in the Puerto Rican trials. Many were poor and had limited access to health care, making it difficult to ensure they fully understood the risks involved. It's a reminder that even with scientific progress, we need to prioritize ethical considerations and protect the vulnerable.
That's a crucial point. It's a reminder that scientific advancements don't occur in a vacuum, and it's important to consider the social and ethical implications. But despite those complexities, the results were undeniable. The pill worked.
Yes. In 1960, the FDA approved Inovid, the first commercially available birth control pill. It was a monumental moment, a culmination of years of research advocacy and perseverance.
I can only imagine the impact it had on women's lives.
It was truly revolutionary. Women suddenly had a reliable and discreet way to control their fertility, which opened up a world of possibilities. They could delay marriage, pursue higher education, enter the workforce on their own terms. The pill became a symbol of freedom and empowerment.
But as with anything new and groundbreaking, there must have been some pushback, right?
Of course. Religious institutions, especially the Catholic Church, were strongly opposed, arguing that it was unnatural and morally wrong. Some feared it would lead to promiscuity and undermine traditional family structures.
Sounds like a familiar refrain, sadly.
Mm.
But did those objections have much of an impact on the pill's adoption?
While those voices certainly existed, the pill's popularity soared regardless. It became a cultural phenomenon embraced by millions of women seeking control over their reproductive choices and lives. And to be fair, the early versions had some significant side effects due to high hormone dosages, things like blood clots, nausea, even depression.
So the journey towards a more refined pill continued even after its initial release.
Absolutely. Scientists continued to refine the formula, lowering the hormone levels to minimize side effects while maintaining effectiveness. The pill we know today is a far cry from that first version, thanks to decades of research and improvement.
It's fascinating to see how both the science and the social acceptance of birth control evolve side by side. The pill's impact on society, especially on women's roles, can't be overstated. It really did usher in a new era.
You're absolutely right. It contributed to major social shifts from the sexual revolution to increased female participation in higher education and the workforce.
It's incredible to think how one little pill had such a monumental ripple effect. But I know the innovation didn't stop there. What came next in the evolution of birth control methods?
Well, the development of the pill opened the floodgates. Researchers began exploring new avenues to meet diverse needs and preferences, leading to a wider range of options available today.
The pill really did open up a whole new world, didn't it?
Absolutely. It was a pivotal moment in the history of reproductive health. But the quest for innovation and options didn't stop there.
Of course not. There's always room for improvement, and I imagine researchers were eager to build on that success.
Exactly. And that's where we see a diversification of contraceptive methods. Scientists started exploring new avenues to meet a wider range of needs and preferences.
So what were some of those new avenues? What came after the pill?
Well, one significant development was the evolution of intrauterine devices, or IUDs as they're commonly known.
IUDs. Those have definitely come a long way from the early versions. I have to admit, I used to have this outdated image of them being bulky and uncomfortable.
Yeah, those early IUDs were a far cry from what we have today. But modern IUDs are completely different. They're small, T-shaped devices that are incredibly effective and long-lasting.
So how do they work
Yeah.
exactly? What makes them so effective at preventing pregnancy?
Well, there are two main types, copper IUDs and hormonal IUDs. Copper IUDs like Paragard release copper ions, which create a spermicidal environment in the uterus.
So the copper acts as a barrier, even though it's not a physical barrier like a condom.
Exactly. It's a localized effect that essentially prevents fertilization.
Mhm.
And a big advantage of copper IUDs is that they're hormone-free, which is a major plus for many women.
That makes sense. And what about the hormonal IUDs? How do those work?
Hormonal IUDs like Mirena release a small localized dose of progestin, a synthetic hormone. This thickens the cervical mucus, making it harder for sperm to reach the egg. It also thins the lining of the uterus, making implantation less likely.
So it's a double whammy, making it incredibly difficult for pregnancy to occur. No wonder they're so effective.
Precisely. And here's the kicker. Both types of IUDs are over 99% effective in preventing pregnancy, and they can last for years depending on the type. It's a set it and forget it kind of contraception.
That level of effectiveness and convenience is remarkable. It really highlights how far we've come in terms of contraceptive technology. But IUDs aren't the only long-acting option out there, right?
You're right. Hormonal implants are another excellent choice for long-term reversible contraception. They're tiny rod-shaped devices inserted under the skin of the upper arm.
So it's like a little implant that releases hormones continuously.
Exactly. They provide a steady, low dose of hormones similar to the pill, but without the hassle of taking a daily pill. And they're incredibly effective too, with a 99% success rate. Plus, they can last for several years depending on the implant.
It's amazing how these innovations have given people so much more choice and control over their reproductive lives. But let's face it, life happens, and sometimes even the best-laid plans go astray. What about those times when an unplanned pregnancy is a possibility, maybe due to contraceptive failure or unprotected sex?
You're talking about emergency contraception, often referred to as the morning after pill. It's a crucial safety net that can help prevent pregnancy after unprotected sex.
I remember when emergency contraception first became available. It felt like a huge step forward, giving people more control in situations that previously felt much more limited.
It was a game changer for sure. The earliest forms of emergency contraception involved taking high doses of regular birth control pills, but those often came with unpleasant side effects.
So what are the options like today?
Thankfully, we've come a long way. Now we have dedicated morning after pills like Plan B One Step, which contains a single hormone, levonorgestrel, and is available over the counter in many countries. There's also Ella, which contains ulipristal acetate and is even more effective, working for up to 5 days after unprotected sex.
It's incredible how far we've come in terms of the options available. From ancient plant-based remedies to high-tech implants and emergency contraception, it's clear that the desire to control fertility has been a constant throughout human history.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember that birth control isn't just about science and technology. It's intricately connected to social and political realities. Access to safe and reliable contraception has been and continues to be a key aspect of women's rights and empowerment.
You're so right. It's easy to focus on the advancements and forget about the bigger picture. The social and political aspects of birth control are just as important as the science itself.
Definitely. It's been a long and often challenging journey to get where we are today. The fight for reproductive rights is ongoing, and it's important to acknowledge both the progress we've made and the challenges that still lie ahead.
Absolutely. We can't take our access to safe and reliable contraception for granted. So where do we go from here? What does the future of birth control look like?
That's a great question, and one that's difficult to answer definitively. But I think we can expect to see continued innovation and a focus on developing even more personalized and user-friendly options.
Personalized options. What do you mean by that?
Well, just as medicine in general is moving towards a more personalized approach, so too is the field of contraception. Researchers are exploring ways to tailor birth control methods to individual needs and preferences, taking into account things like genetics, lifestyle, and even personal values.
That's fascinating. It sounds like the future of birth control is all about empowering individuals to make choices that are right for them.
Exactly. It's about giving people the tools and the knowledge to take control of their reproductive health and make informed decisions. And I think that's something worth celebrating.
I completely agree. It's been an incredible journey exploring the history of birth control, from ancient remedies to modern innovations. We've covered so much ground, and it's clear that this is a topic that continues to evolve and impact our lives in profound ways.
It really has. And it's a reminder that the quest for safe, effective, and accessible contraception is far from over. It's an ongoing process that requires continued research advocacy and open dialogue.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and ever-evolving world of birth control. It's been a thought-provoking exploration of history, science, and the ongoing struggle for reproductive freedom.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you. May we all continue to learn, advocate, and support each other in this vital endeavor.
Until next time, keep those curious minds engaged and never stop exploring.